Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a few weeks since I've recorded something. Just been, I'm going to give you the same spiels I've always given you. Been busy, couldn't find the right time, and, I tried once to record and it just turned into a mess of jumble. So, scrapped it. Here we are. And these aren't excuses, people. As we speak, I'm likely going to have to take a break from recording this because I'm in the middle of food prep and the oven will go off any minute now. So I'm going to try to keep this one short and to the point. This week's episode is going to be story time. I'm going to tell you guys a story. And so last year, before the crazy hecticness, I mean literally edging upon the start of the most hectic near year I've had in a long time. It was my uncle's birthday. Oh, and there's the oven right there. Why I remember that will be divulged later in the episode. But it was his birthday around that time. And he had always showed an interest in woodworking, more so turning, which is basically when you use a lathe to spin a piece of wood and you use a little kind of bar with different shapes and different cutting ends so to shape the bar as it's spinning. It's usually how they make things like table legs and baseball bats and such. Just giving you guys some background here. And he had always shown a little bit of interest in that. And so for his birthday, as you know, it's usually hard to buy stuff for, men that aren't, boys, if you will. By then, men usually are like, I don't need anything, I don't want anything. So I tend to think that sometimes experiences are a better choice. And I've gotten that viewpoint primarily because of things I've gotten over the years, for sure. Around that time, I purchased a class for both of us to attend. I had never done any lathe work either, and I thought it'd be fun just to kind of tinker with it. And we went to the class, and literally a few days after the class, within days, by the way, is when I got some bad news at work, and that's when kind of everything kind of started progressively, exponentially increasing in just busyness, difficulty, but whatever you want to say. So why is that important? Well, he in the class was like enjoying himself. I took a few pictures while we were there. He was having such a blast. He was really enjoying it. He seemed like that like child creative spark was there, right? I talk about on different podcasts how if you're trying to be a creative person, if you're trying to do creative endeavors, one of the greatest things that I tend to want to keep alive is that childlike curiosity of knowing and exploring and seeing something new and attempting something new. And I saw that with him the day of the class. So much so that I sent pictures to his wife when we were in the class, and she was like, "Oh my God, he looks so happy." I don't, it's that comments like that, some along those lines. And so it was really nice to kind of be able to experience that with him, have those memories with him, but also give him the ability to do something he's been wanting to do for a long time. So ever since then, I've been telling him like, maybe you should get a lathe. Maybe you should get a lathe. You have the space for it, and it's something that he seemed to enjoy, and it gives him a creative outlet, right? I'm a big proponent for not just physical outlets, for training your meat bag, as I like to call it. You need that, especially as a male. I have a whole episode about this. But I do think there is something to that Miyamoto Musashi mindset of like, you need to both be the artist and you need to be the warrior, and you need to be everything. In fact, I have another episode about that. The whole idea of the warrior, the poet, the father, I can't remember what I called it. Look back, you'll figure out which one it is. And for a year now, I've been telling him like, hey, you should look into a lathe. I've sent him some links, but you know what I mean? It's always so easy to make excuses when you're dealing with your day-to-day. It's always so easy to just dismiss and push away and really look at things and dismiss them because you don't have the time or the money or the motivation at the moment to do something. So after a while, I stopped kind of sending them links because I keep a track of all this stuff. I do woodworking myself. I do woodworking. Is that the right way of saying it? Anyways, I'm a woodworker myself. I have a ton of tools. I'm constantly looking at tools. So I have like search engine notifications on different apps, the Craigslist, the OfferUps, the Facebook Marketplace, and I keep an eye on these things. And after a while, like I stopped sending them to him because it seemed like he was hesitant to even move things along. So I said, all right, cool. And a year passes now, and we're like looking into another year, and I came across a really nice lathe, which is, for those that don't know, it's the machine that you use to turn wood. And it had a great capacity. It was a really large lathe, which is what you want because then you have the ability to do larger objects. Baseball bats require a larger lathe. You can't just do a little tiny lathe that you would make like a handle for a pot and pan. You would need a larger lathe to be able to do a baseball bat because you need that length, right? So I came across a really good deal, and I reached out to the guy, and I kid you not, it was like within days of his birthday, and I was still trying to figure out like, maybe you'd take him out and do something fun. And I reached out to this guy. This guy was kind of a woodworking kind of artist kind of guy, and he was just tinkering with new hobbies. Now he had a boat or something he was trying to get up and running, and he was trying to get rid of a lot of his woodworking stuff. And so I talked to him a little bit, and honestly, I got a hell of a deal for it. I'm not going to tell you what I paid for it because you'll still judge me. But for that machine, for that brand, for everything that came with it, it was a hell of a deal. It was a hell of a deal, to the point where like even if I bought it and I kept it and I sold it or whatever, like I could have still made a profit on it. But I digress. I bought it for the sole purpose of giving it to him. This is something that was important for me to do, primarily because I tend to find that men are stoic in nature, especially when they get into their older ages. They're stoic, they internalize everything, they suffer in silence. And I'm not going to tell you that that's what all men are like, and I'm not going to tell you that my uncle is suffering, but that is just an example of what I feel like men tend to do. Men internalize everything and they don't externalize it, which females are very good at doing, which is probably why they have a better mental state at times. But because men internalize it, you see just more stoic, serious men, especially in their older ages. And I think it's very important to keep that childlike whimsy and the childlike curiosity for life and the passion for learning new things and trying new things. And that's exactly what his wife pointed out to me when we took this class, and what she saw in those pictures. And for me, it was a perfect storm. I saw a piece of equipment that worked great. It was a hell of a deal. I mean, for what I paid for that, keep in mind, it's a very big name brand lathe. For what I paid for it, I would not have been able to get a smaller version of that, which is the pots and pans size lathe. So I got a hell of a deal on it, and it just worked out perfectly. And so I was scheduled to go to his house, maybe have some dinner or something, and I went over, and he greeted me like normal. It was good normal conversation, and then he opened the garage because he's going to show me something, and I was like, oh, well, here, let me show you something in the trunk. And then I kind of like opened it up to him, and I was like, he's like, surprise. And I don't think he necessarily like it clicked right away. Like he was just like, oh, you bought a lathe. And I was like, I did. And I was like, happy birthday. And then I think it took a while, like we were unloading it, and I think he was processing it first. And then after a while, like when we started putting it together, because that thing was not going to fit in my car in one piece, I would need a truck. As we were putting it together, I started seeing like that whimsy come back out. I started seeing like that excitement. And he started like looking at it and started like taking it into consideration, like what he could do, and his mind. I could see him like thinking in his head, like working about like the things he could do and the excitement that came with it. And and then it hit me a little further when his wife comes out and like she saw it, and then she started tearing up, and I was like, oh man, because I think she understood what that meant for him, right? Like what that was. Like when you see somebody who was so excited after the class and he was talking about it and he was really like excited to see what he made and how he made it, and learning, and he was excited about the machine, and he was talking about the machines afterwards. To see him have that, like, she started crying, and I was like, oh man, I can't be watching this. So ultimately, it was a good experience, and I hope that he really does take these next few months to organize his garage and start really tinkering and playing with it, right? Despite what you have going on in your life, and this is so hypocritical for me to say right now in this point in my life, but I'm going to say it anyways. Despite what you have going on in your life, you do have to find some time to have joy and have fun and enjoy yourself and let that childlike whimsy and excitement come out. You have to let the ability to let that little kid out. Let that little kid come out and play and enjoy his or herself. Whether or not you do great, whether or not you do bad product, whether or not it's not pretty or great, who cares? Who cares? At the end of your life, whenever you sit there and look at the things you've done, yes, there'll be times that you look at things and say, I wish that would have been worked out. But for the most part, I find that most people look at things and say, I'm glad I tried it. I'm glad I tried it. I did it. Or I went that far. Or I attempted something that scared me. And I think that's where some of that childlike whimsy comes from. It's not just about learning something that you've been wanting to learn. It's about going for it. Because there are times in life where the fear of something prevents us from going and trying something out. And so I'll leave you with that. That's a story that literally happened a few weeks ago, and I was trying to record this podcast around that time, but just been busy. But it was an interesting story, and I wanted to share with you, not because I need any sort of pat in the back regarding this gift. Like, I would have never shared this with you guys if there wasn't a lesson per se or something to consider. But I think it's more so about the idea that this is a story, and this was my takeaway from it. And I will also urge you folks to think about times where you can do nice things for people, because I think that is also far more rewarding than going on Amazon and buying yourself something because you're feeling a little frustrated or angry or depressed or whatever the feeling is. And I think that's also a huge benefit that one gets from doing those kind of things. So I hope you take a couple minutes to think about this week's podcast, what I just told you, my story, and get a little thought on it. Give yourself a little perspective, a little concept of what I'm trying to portray or show you folks in this week's episode. I hope to come back next week, but like I always tell you, if you found this useful, fun, great, insightful, thought-provoking, share it with somebody. It's the only reason I do this is to kind of provoke thought and hopefully improvement. I am LifeGeneralist, and this has been another episode of Curious John.